How about that, huh? You know, every so often I have to pinch myself because I still don't believe that we won a national championship. I went to IU for 4.5 glorious years. I went to every single game, not sober, unfortunately. I stayed, though. I didn't leave at halftime like a majority of people do, or did, I should say. Can you talk quickly about that moment, and did you have to pinch yourself? Because even after, you know, the Penn State game, we're good, but are we that good? And after the Oregon game, are we good? You know, after Ohio State, I feel like we could do it, but it just seemed like it wasn't real. Does that make sense? I mean, you called it. How was it?
Real. Surreal. It's the greatest moment that Indiana football's ever had. It may be the greatest story ever told about college football, because what Curt Cignetti did at Indiana the past couple of years is unheard of. And I hate the transfer portal. I hate NIL. But I love it now. Because there's no doubt, even Curt Cignetti, as smart as he is, and I think he's the smartest college football coach in the country, even if they didn't have the transfer portal and they didn't have NIL, it couldn't have happened in 2 years. It certainly couldn't happen in Indiana in 2 years. And that's not a knock on Indiana, but the fact of the matter is, one of the reasons Indiana football became a national champion was because they could get an offensive line and a defensive line. Those two parts of a football team are the most important parts, whether you like it or not. If you don't have those guys, I don't care how good the quarterback is, how good the running backs are, how good the wide receivers are. If you can't block for them, and if you can't tackle the other team, and you can't dominate inside, you're going to have no chance to win everything. And this team now has that because of NIL and because of the transfer portal.
Well said. Now, Don, you spent more than 50 years as the voice of the Hoosiers. After all these years, what has Indiana University meant to you personally?
Well, I never went to college. I got out of high school, didn't know what I wanted to do, had about 6 or 7 jobs, went to work for the railroad. And one night I'm sitting in the railroad depot, 9 at night till 6 o'clock in the morning was my shift. And I was looking at Sport Magazine during a lunch break. I was the only person in the depot, incidentally, because I could take his lunch break as long as I wanted to. But literally, I'm looking at Sport Magazine. That was a competitor of Sports Illustrated back in the 60s. And I'm looking at the back inside cover, and it said, "How would you like to be a sportscaster?" And I said, you know what? I think I could do that. And I took a home correspondence course from a place called Career Academy in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Got halfway through it, went up to the radio station, incidentally, the first day that I got the correspondence course, and asked the local radio station if I could sit there and watch what these guys did, how they got about their business as radio people, so to speak, and what kind of work they did. And I went there every day after I got off work just to see how they worked and what they did. Now, that didn't help me become a sportscaster because none of these guys knew anything about sports. They were disc jockeys, and half the time I had to wake up the morning guy to get him out of bed to sign on the radio station at 6 a.m. because that's what time I got off work. So at any rate, long story short, the biggest thing for me, from the standpoint of what Indiana University means to me and what my job means to me, is the fact that I got a chance to work college athletics for almost my entire adult life, something that I never thought was possible. I worked at it like crazy to get better because I was horrible the first job. The first radio broadcast I did might have been the worst in history. And I mean that sincerely. And I have the tape, and you'll never hear it. But I would tell you this. I've gotten to do what I've wanted to do, play-by-play, for almost 60 years now. Nobody is blessed like that in our business. I've gotten to do it 53 of those years at Indiana University, and even though I never went to college, I just got an honorary degree from Indiana University's Alumni Association. And I still would have flunked out if I had gone to college.
Now, we talked a little bit before this event or this evening, and you mentioned you maybe lied to get your first job in broadcasting. Is that fair to say?
It's not maybe.
Okay, I was trying to be nice.
I literally, when I went to Butte, Montana for my first radio job, I went with the sports crew because on my shift, incidentally, I was a 9 at night till 6 in the morning worker at the depot, the train station that I worked at. My shift at night and my first radio job was in Butte, Montana, 9 at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. From 9 to midnight, I was a DJ. From midnight to 3, I was the janitor, cleaning toilets and emptying waste baskets, scrubbing floors, and then from 3 to 6, I was the farm director. Don't ask me about that. So all I can tell you is I got some experience there, came back to Illinois, where I came from, and applied for a job as a sportscaster in a station called WOLI in Ottawa, Illinois. I walked in for the interview, had the interview. Guy asked me if I'd done play-by-play out in Butte, Montana. I said, yes. Had not done it. So I did my first game a month and a half later, and again, I set radio back 1,000 years because it was horrific. In those days, they signed the radio station off at 10 p.m. This is an FM radio station I worked for. At 11 o'clock that night, I took the equipment back to the radio station, figuring there would be nobody there, wouldn't have to talk to anybody because I knew I was horrible. And when I got to the radio station, pulled in the parking lot, and I see the silhouette of the general manager standing in the doorway, waiting for me to come in with the equipment. Got out of my car, walked into the thing. I said, or he said, I thought you told me you'd done play-by-play before. I said, well, Mr. Porso, I said, I lied about that because I figured if I had told you that I had done no play-by-play, you wouldn't have hired me. He said, no, and the letter starts with, for the next word, it starts with an S.
I'll say it.
Go ahead.
Shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what he said was, you've got 3 weeks. And I said, does that mean I'm fired? And he goes, after 3 weeks, if you're not dramatically better, you will not be here. So the next day, I went to a broadcaster who was Art Kimball. He was in LaSalle, Peru, Illinois, 15 miles down the road. Never met the guy, but a really good play-by-play broadcaster. I called him up and I said, Art, I said, you don't know me. My name's Don Fischer. I did the first radio broadcast I've ever done for a football game last night, and it was the worst broadcast in history, and I admit it. And I said, I need help. Any chance that you would talk to me about what I need to do to get better, because I'm going to get fired in 3 weeks if you don't. He said, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, I'm going to church. He said, what are you doing after church? I said, whatever you want me to. And I walked into that man's house at 12 noon on a Sunday, and he spent 5 hours with me. You talk about mentorship, what this program is all about here tonight. He spent 5 hours with me. I took copious notes, and in that 5-hour period, everything that I learned about play-by-play and how to prepare for broadcast and games and those kinds of things, I've used for the last 59 years. The guy was phenomenal, and it was one of the reasons I still had a job 3 weeks later.
That's incredible. So after that, you obviously got better because you didn't get fired, I assume.
Correct.
Yeah. Did you get right? I mean, IU took some years, right, to get to what did you do? What other sports did you
Well,
play-by-play?
I did everything back in the day. From a high school standpoint, I did everything. I did football, basketball, baseball. I never did soccer, I never did hockey, but I did just about everything else. And when I went, one of my jobs before I got the job at IU was in Terre Haute. I was doing 175 play-by-play games a year. In that time frame, I was doing Indiana State, I was doing Rose-Hulman, both football, basketball, and baseball. I did high school sports. There were, I think, 7 or 8 schools in Terre Haute at the time. And I was doing games every Friday night for football games. I was doing games every Saturday, football-wise. I was doing games all through the week during basketball season. I was doing races at the Terre Haute Action Track, sprint car races in the dirt. I was doing those things on Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays during the week, on weekends, during the summertime. I did the Ray Park City Championship in golf. They had an elevated green on the last hole of that golf course. I sat behind the elevated green, talked about the guy's drives coming up the fairway in 18, and I had a guy with me that was a good golfer and knew what he was talking about. I didn't. And this guy did a great job as the color analyst, and I've always had good color analysts. As you all know, if you listen to our broadcast in football and basketball, I have the 2 best voices in college athletics from an analytical standpoint. Buck Sewer for football and Eric Sewer, his son, for basketball. These 2 guys never bring a note to a football or a basketball game. They know the sport, they watch film, and they know everything they know about the other team by doing their homework. Never bring a note to the ball game, not one time, neither one of them. They
bring notes.
They are phenomenal, and they do a tremendous job for me, and they are a big reason why our broadcasts are successful.
So obviously the success you had at Indiana, it started early on. What was the one welcome to the big time moment you remember doing an IU basketball or football game?
Well, the biggest moment I had in that regard was the very first game I did at Indiana in 1973. It was Indiana against Illinois. Lee Corso's first year as Indiana's coach. He talked to everybody leading up to that first ball game, and any of you that remember, Lee was quite the guy in regard to promotion, and he promoted like crazy. You people need to be there at least an hour, 2 hours early to watch this team warm up, get ready to play this football game in my first season as the head football coach. And of course, everybody they literally showed up. I mean, we had a full house that day. It was packed. And of course, in those days, we had both end zones that were still open. And you had to come down this big hill, especially for the players that came out. At any rate, an hour before the ball game, there was nobody on the field. 50 minutes before the ball game, the Illinois players were out there. They're all warming up. Indiana still hasn't shown up. 30 minutes before the ball game, no Indiana. 10 minutes before the ball game, still no Indiana. About 3 minutes before we were supposed to kick off, 2 big red buses start down the hill. And they get down to the bottom of the hill, right about where the team would normally come out. Lee Corso gets off the bus first, starts running out on the field. Here come all the players behind him, and they're all running out in the field. Place goes nuts. Now, why they were nuts, I don't know, because obviously you had to be ticked if you came that early and got to see nothing. But literally, the place goes wild, and what happens? The official throws a flag. Delay of game. They didn't get out there on time. So they literally gave them a penalty to start the ball game. That was my first introduction to Indiana football and to Indiana University sports.
That's incredible. And now you got to see a lot of interesting moments, I would say. The chair that coach threw across and then Lee Corso play a game with no fans, one game, or is that folklore?
No fans?
Yeah, or maybe it was another coach. I thought I heard one time he pulled the team off the field. Maybe, whatever.
Did you dream? Did you dream that?
I did have a couple Miller Lights. Speaking of Coach Knight, obviously a dynamic personality. What can you tell me about his personality and comparing that to Signetti?
Are you talking about Coach Knight and Signetti?
Yeah, because I feel like
You want me to compare them?
I feel like they're very similar in ways.
Some ways, you're right.
They're tough to talk to. They're probably tough to, get to know.
Well, Signetti, just so you know, is a lot easier than Bob Knight ever was.
Okay.
Just so you know. No, I will tell you this. They are a lot alike in this respect. Signetti is an incredible watcher of film. He watches film of players. He watches film of opposing players. He watches film of high school recruits. And he vets every single person that walks in the door of the Indiana football program. If you don't fit his criteria, you don't stay. You're out. It's that simple. He believes very strongly that you have to fit the program. And Bob Knight was the same way. Now, Coach Knight got several guys on his basketball teams through the years that didn't fit because they didn't like it. And I understand that because Knight was not an easy guy to play for. Anybody that watched Indiana basketball back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and until he was let go in 2000 knows that he was a very challenging coach to players, very intimidating in many ways. Signetti, in his own way, is kind of intimidating too, but not to the degree that Coach Knight was, just so you know. I will tell you this. I think both of them were, I think Coach Signetti is the finest football coach I've ever been around. And I love Bill Mallory to death, and I thought what he did at Indiana was remarkable, considering how few, we almost didn't get three-star guys when Coach Mallory was the coach, but he developed players. And we had guys that turned into pretty good football players that were guys that nobody ever recruited. I mean, we got some walk-on kids that were pretty good football players. So what he did with what he had was remarkable. But what Signetti has done is taken advantage of the system, which is what you have to do. You've got to adapt to what is going on in the world as far as college athletics is concerned. If you don't adapt, you're dead. And Signetti is the first to tell you that. And he does, like I said, he vets everybody, but he is so good at figuring out if you can handle the process or not. And his process is very difficult, but very fair. And that's the one thing I would say about Coach Knight. He sometimes wasn't very fair, to be quite honest. He was really tough on kids. And there were guys that he thought could handle it, and some guys couldn't, and they left. But most of the guys that stuck around revered him as a basketball coach. And Signetti, I think, has the same quality, because he doesn't get real close with his players. He basically kind of hands off. He lets his coaches coach these guys, but he's always there to dictate, I don't like that, I like this, that's got to stop, that kind of thing. He knows exactly how he wants it done, and he does it better than anybody I've ever seen. Coach Knight, he coached probably better than most in the college profession. I think he was one of the greatest coaches of all time. I think other people may have more wins than him, but he did it with lesser people. I'm talking about lesser talent people, not lesser people, but lesser talented people. Distinction there. I think Coach Knight was able to mold players the way he wanted to. Signetti's kind of the same way, so they have a lot in common.
Great. Now, speaking of basketball and the coach, what are your thoughts on Coach DeVries and what he's done so far? And what are your expectations, I guess, going forward?
My expectations are not what most Indiana basketball fans' expectations are. And I say that, I understand. Everybody wants Indiana basketball to be what it used to be. It's just not right now. Hasn't been for a long time, unfortunately. We've gone through a lot of coaches. A lot of different things have happened. The Kelvin Sampson era happened, and obviously it cost us big time. Tom Crean came in. Some people say, well, Tom Crean did okay, but he wasn't great. Well, he recreated the program. In his 3 years there, prior to Indiana starting winning again, he did what he could because he had nobody on the roster that was there the year before, except for 2 walk-ons when he got here. The rest of those guys were all gone. Some of them were kicked off, as you know, and all that kind of thing back in the day. So at any rate, I will say this about Darren DeVries. He came in, his press conference, when he was introduced to the media and to the Indiana people that were there at that press conference, said so many of the same exact things in a different way, but said so many of the same exact things that Curt Cignetti said when he came here. I was stunned by that. And I had a big smile on my face because I said, if this guy is copying what Cignetti's been doing, we're going to win at Indiana basketball again. And I think you will start to see it this year, because last year he got a late start because of the transfer portal and all those kinds of things, and the fact that he was hired late. Obviously, he didn't have a chance to get very many really good players out of the portal. He got guys that were mid-major players. These kids coalesced, however, immediately as a team. We went to San Juan, Puerto Rico. I went with them on that trip. I wanted to see if these guys, or what kind of kids these guys were, and how good they would play together initially. And I was stunned by the fact that they were together immediately and were unselfish, worked hard, played their butts off, and they did that throughout the season, but they wore down. They were mid-major players that had never been through the grind of a Big Ten season, and they really struggled because of that at the end of the year, unfortunately. But I will say this about DeVries: I think he overachieved with the talent level that he had at Indiana last year, and I think you're going to see a completely new Indiana program this season simply because of the bigs that he's bringing in and so on, and what he did here in this transfer portal, pretty doggone impressive. Of what we needed to get, because he had to do the same thing he did a year ago, is get a brand new roster of players.
Now, speaking of, continuing talking about basketball, Assembly Hall is electric, and I've rushed the court twice in my career. Keep your applause down, no big deal. I was hungover for one of them too, so that was impressive that I made it on.
That's the second time you talked about that.
College was very important to me. What were some of the most electrifying Assembly Hall games that you've ever called? And obviously, the Watt shot is probably one that comes to mind, but maybe something that we would forget or not be familiar with.
Well, my very first Indiana-Purdue game was in 73-74 season. I got to see Indiana play Purdue for the first time in the rivalry, and it was at Assembly Hall. And the game went right down to the wire. And John Laskowski stepped to the free throw line with about 5 seconds left in the ball game. Indiana was down a point, 2 points, or not a point, I'm sorry. Laskowski steps to the free throw line. They called him super sub. He went to the free throw line, hit the first free throw to tie it, hit the second free throw to give Indiana a lead by a point. On Purdue called timeout. After the timeout, they decided to go for a long baseball pass down the floor. The ball was thrown in to a guy named Mike Steele, who was a forward on that basketball team at Purdue. He caught it in that far corner, down where the students sit. You know where I'm talking about as they come out of the locker rooms now. That corner, that ball was caught by Steele. He went up for a jump shot, and Steve Green, who couldn't jump over the phone book, went up and blocked his shot. And Indiana won the game, and the student body charged the floor. Congratulations.
That was that's fantastic. Now, my friends and I, we like to talk about Mount Rushmores of decades and different players that have went through Indiana, and I would go with football and basketball. Do you have a Mount Rushmore of like guys you got to the joy of calling or watching play?
Well, I mean, there are so many great players that have come through Indiana.
I know it's a very loaded question and probably not fair, but
well, it's not fair. It's not fair at all.
Well, here we are.
Here we are. No, there are 2 football players that at Indiana prior to Curt Cignetti that I've revered all the career that they had at Indiana and what they were able to do. Anthony Thompson was the first, and there's no question one of the great running backs ever at Indiana. Anthony was tremendous.
Should have won the Heisman, right?
He should have won the Heisman that year. The kid from Houston, Ware, I think it was, won it that season.
Andre Ware.
Yeah. And so, yeah, he should have won the Heisman, in my opinion, or any Indiana opinion. And the other guy was Antoine Randall. And Antoine Randall is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, college football athlete that I have ever seen. He did things on a football field that you just can't explain. I had a hard time calling his games because he did things I couldn't believe. He was doing things out there. He was spinning. He looked like a top at times. He looked like, what was that Roadrunner? That Roadrunner cartoon.
Yeah.
He did stuff that was just amazing. I mean, it was amazing to me. What was the whirling dervish thing, the cartoon? Tasmanian Devil. He looked like the Tasmanian Devil out there. I'm not kidding you. He was phenomenal as an athlete. And the saddest part of his career at Indiana was they never had a winning season when he was the quarterback. He went 5-6 his last year as a senior. The reason they went 5-6 and not 6-5 was because Cam Cameron, who was the head football coach at that time, in his last year as the head coach and Antoine's last year as the quarterback, he decided that Antoine was going to be a wide receiver and he was going to bring in a kid he was a big, strong, physical player. Tommy Jones was his name.
Oh, I remember.
He was 6'3", 6'4", had a great body, had a really good arm, and Cam decided we're going to put Antoine at wide receiver, and we're going to make Tommy Jones the quarterback, and I think that'll change everything.
Is that the first game of the season?
That was the first game of the season.
NC State?
NC State. You know who was an assistant on that team? Kurt Signetti. That's the truth. Chuck Amato was their head coach.
Phillip Rivers was the quarterback, right?
Phillip Rivers was the quarterback, exactly. And so Antoine plays wide receiver. We get beat.
Awful game. It was Thursday night, wasn't it?
I can't remember the day.
It was a night game. I
don't care.
Yeah.
All I can tell you is we got beat, and Antoine became the quarterback again the next week and quarterback the rest of the season. If he would have been the quarterback in that first game, I am convinced that Indiana would have won. He would have had a winning season for the first time in his career, and we'd be celebrating him today as one of the greatest of all time.
I agree with you. Do you ever get nervous? Like, did you get nervous in the fourth quarter of that championship game?
I got nervous when I saw all these people here tonight. And I was feeling really bad because John Kaufman over here is sitting there, and he's kicked our butt the last time we played him. That really ticked me off. Nice job, John. No, that guy's a great basketball coach. You guys are lucky to have him. There's no lie about that.
Good. So you briefly touched on NIL and the transfer portal and how you're not like the biggest fan of it. Where do you think it can go from here, and how can we control it as far as, having a cap or having the window open a certain time? I mean, it feels like the Wild Wild West.
It is the Wild Wild West. These college athletes are free agents, and I don't think it can be sustained. So at some point, something's got to change in regard to rules and having rules that can be enforced, whether that's, and I hate to say this, government legislation or whatever. They've got to change it because the NCAA can't do anything anymore. They're afraid they're going to get sued every time that they try to change something. And unfortunately, that's the world we're living in right now. Do I think players should be paid? I thought they were always paid when they got scholarships. Now, most of us in here are old enough to know that should be the way it is, but that's not the case anymore. And I don't have problems with players getting paid, but what are they getting paid for? No, I mean, some of these guys are making millions of dollars, and then they transfer the next year to make $1 million more. It's crazy. So they've got to find some rules out there that they can enforce. And that's the big problem right now. And that's why I say if government gets involved, it'll probably screw everything up. Because we all know what government can do, right? Screw it up. But the fact of the matter is they've got to have some rules and maybe antitrust legislation, that kind of thing, to figure this thing out. Because right now it's a mess, and until they fix it, it's not going to get any better. And here's the thing I hate the most. Now we're talking about what, 24 teams for a college football playoff? That's just crazy. And they're talking about 75 teams now in NCAA basketball. Another expansion. Why? They want to make more money. Yeah. It's that simple. And they're making so much money now, it's amazing, but it's the root of all evil. Yeah. I wish I had more of it.
Now, I think most would agree you're the best at what you do, calling football and basketball games. Is there a sport you wish you or could dabble into, or one that you wish you did instead of the other two? Or if not those two, what other sport would you call?
Well, the one that I always want, the reason I got into play-by-play is I thought I could be a really good baseball announcer. Because I loved baseball. Growing up, I was listening to radio all the time as a kid. Listened to all the great broadcasters. I loved Harry Carey. I thought he was the most exciting guy I'd ever heard when I was growing up. And when he was with the St. Louis Cardinals, and then he got in trouble with Augie Bush and got fired. And next thing you know, he's in Chicago, and now I really hate you. Because I'm not a Cub fan, I'm not a White Sox fan, and I'm not a Reds fan either. I'm a Pirate fan.
God bless you.
You know why I'm a Pirate fan? I was when Roberto Clemente was a rookie, our Little League program in Northern Illinois went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where the Braves were at that time. Roberto was a rookie on the Pirates ball club. The day that I watched him play, he went 3 for 5 at the plate, scored from first base on a double. Think about that. And he caught a ball at the warning track in right field and threw a guy out of the plate. The ball never hit the ground, hit the catcher in the glove, and the guy slid into it. I was hooked. I became a Roberto Clemente fan and a Pirate fan from that point forward. And now the last 20 years, I've become a non-Pirate fan or a non-baseball fan because they stink. Except for Skeens, he's tremendous. I still follow a little bit.
What is your number one feel-good moment from broadcasting?
I don't have just one, but the most recent, obviously, is past January 19th, when Indiana just beat the Miami Hurricanes and won a national championship.
Now, I'm a man enough to admit it, I cried. Did you shed a tear?
I shed a tear in '76. I shed a tear in '81. I shed a tear in '87. And in 2026, I did not shed a tear. I was so excited that I wasn't even thinking about the emotion of the moment. I just was so excited about Indiana winning that national championship and hoping that I made the right call on the broadcast. And I didn't know if I did or not until I listened to it later on. Because I used to listen to everything, after every game. The reason I got better in the broadcast business is because I listened to every broadcast that I did for years. Because I wanted to see what I liked, what I didn't like, throw out what I didn't like, that kind of thing. And it was the smartest thing I ever did. I got better very quickly my first year. As you may know, I kept my job after lying about the job.
I'm going to get that tape. I'm going to get that tape.
You'll never get it. Trust me on that. It's locked up in a vault.
When the day eventually comes that you step away, what do you hope Hoosier fans remember most about your broadcast career?
I can only tell you this. I've been blessed to do this job for 60 years. I've been in the business for 60 years. I've been blessed to do something my entire career, my entire work career, except for the first couple of years out of high school. I've been blessed to be able to do something that I always wanted to do or always thought about wanting to do. and I've been able to do it. And yeah, there are other things that I don't particularly care about from a broadcast business standpoint these days compared to what it used to be, but I'm not having to do any of those things. I'm doing exactly what I got into this business to do and what I love to do, and that's play-by-play. And people say, well, how could you go through all those Indiana football seasons when they weren't winning anything and still love it? I said, because I love doing play-by-play. I just like to explain what's going on a football field or a basketball court or whatever about what's going on there, and hoping that the audience hears what I'm saying, number one, understands what I'm saying, number two, and to some degree is entertained by it. And I love what I do. I really do. And I've been healthy enough, but the good Lord blessed me with genes. My mom is going to turn 100 on May 31st.
Good genes.
And the gene pool that I have is a really good one. And people say, well, when are you going to retire? I said, I don't know. I said it could be next year, it could be the year after that, it could be tomorrow. I just don't know. If you got your health and you love what you're doing, why would you quit?
It's hard to argue that. And before we go, I do have one final question. My dream is to one day, on the greatest college basketball timeout, is carry the flag. Remember how Thomas Peace used to do it back in the day, and then they get students to do it? I've always wanted to do it. Do you know anyone that can make that happen? And should I give you my cell phone, or you want me to give me yours?
You give me yours.
It's not a no.
And I have no idea how to get you that gig. I'm sorry.
Well, I had to try. Don, I can speak for everyone here. Thank you so much for this, for everything you've done for every Indiana fan. It's a joy listening to you. I told you backstage I used to turn down the TV broadcast and listen to you while I watched the game because it was terrible, and you're the best that ever done it. So, Don, thank you so much.
Well, I like to say this. I really enjoyed the program tonight. I mean, this program that you folks are a part of here each and every year is phenomenal. And I want to thank Shelley Schwab. She is the best I've ever been around.
She's a bulldog.
She is absolutely the best. So thank you so much, Shelley. And thank you to all the folks here who have been so kind. And it's been a blessing to be here. Thank you so much.